Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So recently I've been doing a lot of interesting talks and interviews on my second channel, which is dedicated to hangouts. If you're not subscribed to that channel, you should probably go and subscribe to it now. But just in case you've been missing some of these talks, I thought it might be a wise thing to do to put together a little sampler every month. Just a couple of highlights from each talk to give you a rough idea of what they're about, and if you want to see the whole thing you can go and click on the link which will be below. So the first video you'll be seeing samples from is Gender Roles in Islam, in which I got some people together to discuss the recent controversy surrounding the honey badgers and claims that they're Islam apologists. Following that, I'll be showing samples from Defining Patriarchy with Diane Ofilli and Blackwell. Diane is a feminist and Bunny isn't. It's a very interesting talk. After that you'll see samples from a chat about men's issues with American Anarchist. American Anarchist is a young YouTube feminist who asked to do a talk with me, and we discussed various men's issues. It was an interesting chat. And the final sample you'll see is from Masculinity in the Modern World, a talk. There was a lot of people in this chat, including feminists and MRAs and trans people and even a truck driver. So we got a good cross-section of people to talk about masculinity in the modern world. So what I'll do is I'll put timestamps down below in the description, so if you've seen one of these and you don't want to sit through 10 minutes of clips, or you're not interested in a particular one, you can jump ahead to the next one. So let's get stuck into it with Gender Roles in Islam. So I thought, what better way to spend Sunday morning than, instead of talking about one controversial topic, to talk about two.
I forgot, you're in the future.
Religion. Yeah, I'm in the future. I'm always in the future. And I'm not giving you the lotto numbers, so don't ask again.
That's what I wanted.
Oh, man.
Sucks.
So there has been
there's quite a few arguments about Islam and how gynocentric or patriarchal it is.
I
guess we're just here to chat about that.
So we've got Brian, who is representing the honey badgers. Now, am I correct in saying, Brian, that not all the honey badgers agree 100% on this topic?
Yes, we. One of the things that I guess I don't know that. Yeah, one of the things we kind of pride ourselves on is that Honey Badger Radio is certainly not an echo chamber. We have different. We have like in terms of like our core message we agree on, which is examining feminism's foibles and also trying to draw attention to men's issues. But in terms of the nuance surrounding various topics, we don't necessarily agree on. Some of us are very liberal, like Anna Cherry. Some of us are, more libertarian, like Karen and myself, and so on. So
you're going to do your best to represent the different views.
Yeah, I mean, like I can only really speak for myself ultimately, but I know. Well, I guess we'll get into it, but. I know what the core message that goal at least that we were hoping to convey when we made our videos is. So I should be able to do that at least.
And on the other side is Skepo. You want to tell us a bit about yourself, Skepo?
Sorry, yeah. I'm an ex-Muslim. I'm also an ex-Mormon.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, I have a very interesting story.
I don't know if that happens often.
I think there's one other based mama, I think she goes by, is also, or she had Mormonism in her life. I think her parents were converts to the Mormon church for a while. So we come from kind of similar backgrounds, although she never lived in the Middle East. I have. I've lived in Pakistan, Qatar for a while, like Afghanistan for a while, Europe for a long time. So, but she lost her daughter to Egypt. So I lost my children to Pakistan for a while. So again, we come from very similar backgrounds. So we're kind of two unicorns. We joke about all the time. I wasn't really familiar with the honey badgers at all until Habib was on there, and I actually watched some of their other stuff. I reacted very emotionally because it's a very emotional subject to me because of my experiences and what I've seen and just other things. And I went and watched some of the other videos, and I was like, I really agree with a lot of the things they say, and I hadn't really thought about a lot of the issues that they had brought up. And so it's been kind of a really interesting experience for me, and I'm actually kind of excited to have this opportunity to have a chat. Like I think it's gonna be interesting for sure. But I lived under Sharia and not under Sharia. Like I've lived in like the UK as a Muslim, and I was a Niqabi, and I was a liberal Muslim. I was an extremist. I celebrated terrorism, and now I'm an atheist. So I've been on both sides.
Well,
So
I
that's my
mean,
story.
that's good. Well, not good that you celebrated terrorism, but it's good that you're interested in the chat, because I'm hoping to find a middle ground here. So speaking of the middle ground, we've got Spino. Who
Yes,
I think you kind of sit with me somewhere in the middle between the two sides.
Yeah, I have noticed there's a lot of talking past each other when it comes to these conversations about gynocentrism within Islam. But I also think that both sides' rhetoric ends up helping, it ends up hurting the ability to actually communicate. That they don't necessarily disagree on as much as they think they do. It's just the way they say things and the way that most of the ideas are being framed. Makes it sound different. Yeah.
I guess my first thing is that we should probably establish our definitions. So I would like to know what Islam, if we're being accused of Islam apologia, what evidence or what examples is there of that specifically defines Islam apologia? So that would be my first question. Does that make sense?
Well, I would deny that you guys are Islam apologists, and the people that are based on the videos, even the one that I have, like a compilation video, mostly of Karen, people have taken that and called you guys Islam apologists. If I even had said it in as a mistake or just out of emotional, I wouldn't say that at all. I don't think I have said it. But it's not right. You guys are not. None of you guys have said Islam is great. I've never heard any of you guys. It's never come out of your mouths at all. Or Sharia is great, or, that's not true.
All right. I wanted to make sure that I know that. Okay. So what
I kind of have I'm going to go a bit further than Skepo on this then. In certain cases, I have noticed a lot of the rhetoric around the burqa and the hijab and all of that stuff, and whether or not that's a choice, that's a personal choice in many cases. I've noticed that can often become sort of very close to what could be called Islam apologia.
But that's sort of like, if you bring up, like, for example, Boko Haram, where they, bring back our girls and they kidnapped all these girls, but they don't mention all the boys that were shot and burned alive. For whatever reason, it seems like bringing men into the conversation about what's wrong with Islam, that it's bad for everyone, and that ultimately whether or not it's worse for women or whatever is not entirely relevant. That actually upsets more people, and they think that is actually making the problem that is actually twice as big as they think it is. They think that makes it smaller when you say it affects men too. And it's not even to say that, women don't have it bad. It's just that if you want to find out how Islam is bad for women, that's easy to find on the internet. You can find people talking about it on all sides of the political spectrum, as long as they're willing to be critical of Islam. But if you want to find out how it's bad for men there, it's going to be far more difficult. And not to toot my own horn, but I think Honey Badger Radio is one of the few places that does. I'm sure it's not the only one, and hopefully people are going to see that this is a bigger conversation than than they're normally used to. But I think that it's very difficult for people to get their head around. And I think that one of the reasons, and I'll stop rambling here, but I think one of the reasons why people usually say, look at how they treat their women, is it's actually very, it's convenient. It works on people. You can convince them better if you say, this is how it's bad for women, because people do have a tendency to say, holy shit, that's really bad for women. We should probably do something about it. That will be more effective.
And that's actually one of the things I've had sort of in my head is, what if the Middle East does need a sort of, does need 2 or 3 waves of feminism before we can actually address men's issues?
Do you think that because it's expedient, because it's convenient, that we should let them have feminism first?
I don't know if it's possible to progress any other way. Maybe.
So you're speaking from.
We sort of need a. It needs to get worse before it gets better, almost for men when it comes to men's issues.
So you're saying that we almost have to sort of give in to our gynocentric nature, and let us focus on women's issues and let feminism in, and then once feminism makes things worse, then we'll be able to make Middle Eastern MRAs.
Yes.
Wait, do you not think that so much is talked about women because the problem with women is bigger?
It could be that. I mean, again, but the problem is I don't think that the difference between how bad it is for women versus how bad it is for men equals the conversation around whether or not it's worse for men and women. Because if you look at how it's being talked about now in most spaces, you will believe that that men have no problems there, and that women have all the problems there, and you won't even know that men could have problems there, because in order for you to be conveniently convinced that Islam is bad, you have to say, look at how they treat their women there. It's almost like that's the only way you can do it.
But even in situations with Boko Haram, for example, that was clearly worse for the boys, but it was still focused on the girls, wasn't it? So
yeah. But the point I need to.
Yeah, I'm joined by a very sick Bunny Blackwell and Diane Ofilli. So do you guys want to maybe introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves in case people watching don't know who you are? Should we start with you, Bunny?
Oh, certainly. I'm Bunny Blackwell here on YouTube. I occasionally make videos on my highly neglected channel because it takes me forever to make videos and I'm quite busy in my real life. But I tend to take what I attempt is an objective and critical view of things that are taken for granted. I also am pleased to be a regular featured guest on Honey Badger Radio.
Yep. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you do at university?
Oh, I'm just a wee student. I'm studying forensic medicine. So I'm in STEM, and I've actually been thinking about changing the course of how many more years I'm going to be spending at school, because being part of the men's rights activism circles, as I'm slowly becoming more exposed to them, I think I may want to spend less time at school so I can have more time to put into real world activism and advocacy. So I'm still going to pursue my degree, of course, but I may not go as far as I had thought, because I want to leave time for the work that I'm starting to do here. I've had so many people contact me and reach out to me with their stories, and how hearing from other people who are willing to ask questions that maybe are uncomfortable to ask, and how it's helped them. I think it's good work. And my focus is not on money or status or fame. I really just want to do good work. And I know that sounds like a corny Hallmark card, but you don't get into medicine if you don't want to do good work. And I think this is just as important as anything else that I could be doing. So yeah, it's kind of changing. It's changing my trajectory a bit, and it's been very eye-opening. I may make a video on that at some point, but yeah. So forensic medicine for now, though.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know you were considering spending more time doing real life activism.
Well, I can't keep up with what's on my plate right now. And I have so many opportunities to go here and go there and speak with this person and investigate this and volunteer here. And I'm really having difficulty juggling my studies and my work and everything else. And something has to give. And if I shave a few years off my school, the only thing it's really going to affect me in terms of is letters after my name and the money I make. But it will free up so much time to balance what I'm doing in, my field with what I'm doing in the world. So, yeah, and I think that I'm finding it very rewarding. I'm finding the people I'm meeting and the opportunities that I'm having to listen to people who might never have the opportunity. I might never have the opportunity to hear their stories is extremely rewarding for me on a level that I don't think any job could necessarily touch. So yeah, it's changing. This whole YouTube thing is changing my brain. So
well, that's interesting. We've infected you.
It's funny though, because my viewpoints have not changed much at all. It's more the heart going into it. Before I was approaching it very academically and almost clinically, but the more people I hear from and their personal stories, the more it is becoming a human endeavor. And I that brings me balance as well, because I tend to view the world in very black and white clinical terms. But there's this human injection right now of empathy that I'm experiencing, and it's very eye-opening.
Well, that's interesting. Diane, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm an English woman, born and bred Londoner. I am very much a feminist, have been since a child before I even knew what that word even meant. I would say that, I write very often on gender. And I would say that I'm somewhat sympathetic to certain, how we say, raised by the men's rights, although it's not something that I very align with.
I think you were cutting out a little bit there, Diane.
Okay.
Can you repeat that last bit?
Yeah, I'd say that I'm sympathetic to certain issues raised by the men's rights movement, although it's not something that I directly align with. It's something that I've touched on throughout my years of feminist activism and my writing. For example, I interviewed a sex worker whose profession led to her becoming a men's rights activist.
Yeah, our chat last time, you were definitely very open-minded towards the men's rights movement. I guess the one thing we kind of disagreed on, though, was patriarchy theory and the question whether women are oppressed in the Western world. And for the sake of this conversation, I just want to keep it in the West. I don't want to touch the Middle East for this conversation.
Wise man, Bane, wise man.
Yes, that's a whole nother talk for another time. But so you, I guess that's the topic of today. You believe we live in a patriarchy in the West, and women are oppressed in the West?
I do think we live in a patriarchy. I would say it's a relative one. I don't think it's an extreme patriarchy. You know, some may say it's patriarchy light, if you will, but I do think there are still some ways in which certain privileges or opportunities are weighted towards boys and men in a way they're not towards women.
Isn't the counter argument the same, though, that women have some advantages that men don't?
Yes, but it's, like I say, it's a relative thing. I mean, for it to be patriarchy means that more of said privileges and opportunities are accessible to men and not women. Now, you can say access is not so much of an issue nowadays because of laws and certain social norms, but I think in certain areas of life, there are still ways in which men are advantaged in a way that women are not, or are yet to be fully.
Okay, so that's our first topic. Bunny, you want to jump in on that?
I would like to know what the specifics are, what specific opportunities you feel that are still afforded men that are not afforded to the same degree as women, and why you think that is. That would be a good starting point for me.
Yes, well, there's different ways in which patriarchy manifests itself, different areas. You know, you've got family life, you've got economics, you've got society in general, you've got political and what have you. I would say, in terms of sexuality, that women do still suffer somewhat. I do think that the role of being a passive receptacle for male sexuality is still a problem for women. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily use the term rape culture, not necessarily because in my mind, it's an American invention and one that's not necessarily relevant to me as an English feminist. But I do think there are ways in which society panders to male sexuality in a way that's not healthy and that is detrimental to girls and women. You know, we are still expected to believe in certain ways that are just wrong as far as I'm concerned. I mean, fair enough, we don't have the FGM of, say, in Africa, but I do think there's still our ways. You know, you still have the slut whore paradigm, and even within modern relationships, even with them changing, there are still ways in which men are afforded a certain amount of control that we don't expect women to necessarily have.
Okay. So let's use the women as passive receptacles for men's sexuality. In that case, why, in some places, is rape not, can a woman not rape a man? Because it would seem to me that if your premise was correct, that it would go the other way. But right now, in many places, women cannot legally rape a man. And
yes.
So go on.
Well, yes, in Britain that's the case. Legally, a woman cannot be convicted of rape because it's defined by digital or penile penetration. That's why, because simply put, we don't have penises. That's why the law says that we can't rape. As far as I'm concerned, it's still rape. The fact that the intercourse was forcible and initiated by a woman doesn't make it any less a violation than if it were by a man. But according to the legal definition, that is what, it's penetration that's the decider.
So to ameliorate this then, changing the laws to make it more equitable would be a way of actually going against what you're saying, that women are the objects of male aggression and lust. So if we were to change the laws to be more equitable, that would actually be a strike against what you have cited as an example of patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what...
Good. Yeah. But we're not doing that. And even feminists aren't advocating for this.
Yeah, recently...
Why should a woman not get the same penalty or punishment for a man as a man for doing the same crime? I would, to be honest, that is exactly why I'm a feminist. If we take the same responsibilities as men, we have to have the same forfeits, the same opportunities, good and bad, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I think everyone here will agree with you on that, Diane. I was just going to say, recently in Israel, there was a feminist lobby group who stopped the change to the legal definition of rape, which would include women. And their reasoning was that if they allow men to accuse women of rape legally, there will be numerous false accusations against women.
Okay, well, I've not heard of that. I don't understand the logic of that. I don't. I think the forcible aspect is what should matter rather than who.
I agree 100%.
Communication. I mean, my issue with rape is the fact that we, of course, condemn it. You know, it's punishable by law. Men, and women can go to jail for it. But what we do in the West is that we condemn and we condone. Sexual harassment and rape to some extent. You know, you still have that. You see the same excuses of what women wore, or how did she or didn't she fight them off. We do still say, well, men are beasts, you know, boys will be boys. We do still use the same excuses that let male perpetrators off the hook. That's my issue. I mean, obviously you do get female sex offenders, but the fact is the vast majority of rapists are male. It's an unfortunate fact.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to get accurate numbers though when we don't acknowledge that females can do it.
Yes, but that is true. But the fact is, I think even if you don't believe the statistics, I would still believe that men rape more often than women because their size gives them an advantage. You know, the fact is, even if women have the same urges to rape, the fact is, us overpowering men on a huge scale is just not possible.
You are making an assumption. You're making the assumption that all rape is physically forced, as opposed to someone taking advantage of someone when they're drunk, or what's the word? Psychologically forcing them into it.
Coerced, yeah. Sorry, it's early Sunday morning, so it's
my brain's not fully working.
I'm full of flu meds, so I'm not going to be any better.
Yeah.
Do you love live streaming?
Well,
anyway,
yeah.
I'm here with the American Anarchist. I gotta say, I don't really know much about you, so do you want to start by maybe telling us a bit about who you are and...
So I'm anonymous, so I'm not going to be telling anybody my name. I'm doing a face reveal at 300 subscribers. I am a feminist, full disclosure on that. I am also, like, if you want to talk about diversity and breaking echo chambers, Bane, yep. I'm also, anarchism is a form of communism. So tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about your beliefs, because I don't think I've had an anarchist on before. So anarchism is, personally, I'm a bit more of, it's a bit more of a philosophical stance for me. But anarchism is basically the idea of getting rid of all forms of unjustified hierarchy, and it puts a burden of proof on specific hierarchies, and basically just asks for it to justify themselves. So a lot of anarchists don't see a justification for the state specifically. It's 200 years of philosophy that I'd have to get into to explain everything, but that's just kind of the brief way that I
don't want to dominate the chat on that. We could possibly do another one in the future, and maybe I could get a capitalist or something in here and to counter. That might be interesting. But I thought it'd be interesting just to get a brief kind of understanding.
Well, considering the fact that I've debated War Corps, I did a terrible job.
That's nothing to be
I did a terrible job. Yeah, I did a terrible job in that debate, but I think that shows I'm not in an echo chamber. Domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that seems to be
50-50.
I'd say that it's close enough to 50-50 that we might as well just call it 50-50.
Yep.
Because there's different stats for different parts of the world. I think in Britain it was like 40-60.
Yeah.
Which is still a really high amount that's not getting addressed. And I do think that with a lot of
trying to avoid using a feminist term here. I wouldn't use toxic masculinity, but like the very like macho culture, basically has this like idea that if you're a man and your wife or your girlfriend beats you, men just even if it's happening in public, men will just kind of stand by and laugh. Be like, oh, you're a bitch who can't take a hit. Or
I've seen women like do that too. I've seen those videos.
Oh, I was going to say that women definitely do it too. But I'm saying that
is it macho culture then, or is that just a societal attitude that men can't really be victims?
I mean, again, I was trying to think of a word for it, so it might not be. I don't think macho culture might be the best word for it, but
I would agree that there might be a macho aspect to it, but whereas macho, the word macho or toxic masculinity tends to be blamed on men as it's a male attitude. I think it's a societal attitude which is pretty much forced on men, and I think women do just as much to reinforce it as men do.
That's the way that I was trying to put it forward, is that it's kind of like this culture where men have to be tough, which that's what macho is. Or at least when I hear that word, that's what I think of, is like, when I think of someone who's macho, I think of a tough guy. So I was simply referring to like this culture where men have to be tough. I wasn't trying to say that like men are the only ones involved in it, but
There's a very interesting video by Tom Golden at the first International Men's Rights Conference. I'll send it to you after the hangout. I think you would find it very interesting. But he talks about that attitude and where it comes from. But I think that attitude is at the core of a lot of men's issues not being addressed, is that we have this attitude that men should just deal with it, or it doesn't count, or we tend to have more sympathy for women in those issues than men.
Yeah, because if you're a man in that situation, you're just to quote the golden one, a beta leftist. Sorry, I really like making fun of white nationalists, but yeah, so you're just apparently this beta male, which also I'm not even going to get into how they completely fucked up the word beta, but you're just a beta, and you deserve what you're getting, is kind of like the attitude that people have about it.
Yeah, well, that's one of the other things that makes men's issues very hard to deal with, is that men tend to have a tendency to throw other men under the bus. And we see that from the right wing, but we also see it from your side with a lot of male feminists.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about I'm also way to the left of Cenk Uygur, so I'm not going to try and claim that I'm not going to claim that, he's too far left, but I'm going to claim that this is definitely just an issue that I've had with him, is that is his hypocrisy when it comes to women and men's issues. If a man's getting assaulted, it's like, come on, you can't take a hit. But if a woman's getting hit, which again, I don't think women should be getting hit. I don't think anybody should be getting hit.
Yeah. I've also seen Cenk referred to a 13-year-old boy who's been sexually assaulted by his teacher as being lucky.
Oh, that one really pisses me off.
He used to do it a lot. It's something he doesn't tend to do that often now, because I think he got a lot of backlash, but he used to go on about it all the fucking time. I have with feminists when they tend to talk about gender roles. When we talk about positive male aspects, they say, but hold on a second, females can have these aspects too, so they're not actually male aspects, they're just aspects in general. Okay, fair enough. But then they bring up the negative male aspects or stereotypes, and they say, well, these are mainly male aspects. So we'll call them toxic masculinity, and we'll ignore them in women. Or if we have examples of them in women, we'll say it's women being forced into those roles by patriarchy or whatever.
Well,
so it seems that the positive aspects are taken away from masculinity and given to everyone, but the negative aspects are lumped purely on masculinity. Well, I think it's an incredibly biased way of looking at things.
The one thing that bothers me about this is, in order for a lot of the things about toxic masculinity and all that to even be a thing, people have to somehow fail to acknowledge that. And from everything I've ever seen in my life, this is the honest truth. Women can be just as dangerous, if not more so, than any man. You never ever discount anybody just because, oh, they're smaller and weaker. That doesn't mean anything. I've been in fights. I've done my share of just about everything under the sun in my lifetime. And women can be just as good at video games, just as dangerous in a martial arts class. Anywhere.
Just as dangerous at video games.
Hey,
I've had virtual death.
I've had a lot of girls whoop my ass in fighting games, and I'm not ashamed to admit that, because they can be just as good at that shit as men are. And when you fail to acknowledge that, that is stupidity on a level I cannot begin to comprehend.
I mean, I was saying to Bane earlier that there was that film about like hypermasculinity or whatever. It had a lot of good points, and the best points to me were actually around like sports and about like boys like being built up to play football and be jocks and like, boast about how many women they bang and everything is just like trophies and everything's like that guy's a fag and I'm stronger than him and I'm more dominant and how that has like such negative impacts. But then there was another part.
Aren't they competing for female attention?
Maybe, but they're built up that way. Like, and I can relate to that because in my schooling experience, when we went to like assembly, they would spend like fucking 45 minutes just talking about fucking rugby. And me and my friends were like all stoners. We didn't give a shit. We're just sitting there like, oh God, why do we have to hear about the fucking rugby, team?
Roger, can you switch off your cam because we're having some lag problems before?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a friend of mine complaining about how there were parts of the hangout that were repeating. Skipping and repeating, and I'm like, what? Okay.
I just want to quickly finish my point. Like, so it had a really good bit about like kind of like homophobia and hypermasculinity and sports and expectations in schools and like the way men talk to each other, and that was all fine with me. But then there was a section about video games, and this guy said, you get a bunch of people together in a room and they're drinking alcohol and they're listening to the rap music, and then they play a video game, and then he's like, and what do you think is going to happen? Somebody's going to die. And I was like, wait a minute. Now you've totally fucking lost me. Like, I don't think playing video games is going to make you go kill people.
No,
so there was some bits
of
that film that were dodgy, that were kind of like, now I think you're overanalyzing it a bit. Like, I've played games and I've never tried to kill anyone. So I don't
actually,
Tim. I did a video replying to like Goodfella, who's I think it's in MRA. I'm not quite sure.
No, he's anti-feminist.
Anti-feminist dude. And one of his questions was, why are they trying to get women into all of these science roles and like these academic roles rather than like working as like a truck driver and a construction worker and all this kind of stuff. And I see that more as just like human nature. It's like people would prefer to be doing jobs with higher qualifications, higher pay, and more prestige. And so if you open up that job market, it's not like everybody's going to suddenly be like, oh, I can't wait to be like a construction worker or something. It doesn't work that way. Like, well, I think men in the past, that's like kind of what they've been. Oh, except you. Sorry.
Hold on. Can I just jump in there for a second? But don't less women choose to go into politics?
Well, yeah,
politics,
like I've had that conversation with my friends. Like, I was saying, why do you think women don't go into politics? Because we were looking at the women's equality page for the party in the UK. And I was saying, why do you think that? And she seemed to think it was down to discrimination, but had nothing to back it up. And then like I asked, she wants to be a teacher. So I asked her, oh, why don't you want to be a politician? And she didn't really have an answer for it. So I think it's just a lot of those jobs really are down to.
it's not being a politician isn't an easy job. It's you're working 12, 14-hour days in a lot of cases.
Actually,
also,
Bane, I've got it.
I'd love to know is why everything
to one partner. It's sad.
Why everything has to boil down to a gendered issue. Like we were talking about domestic violence earlier, and it has to be this gender may have it worse. When we know domestic violence happens to both genders on almost equal levels, just in different ways, and men are grossly underhelped when it comes to domestic violence.
My girlfriend answered that question when she said it was male dominance is the cause behind it.
But it's very hard to separate one set of problems from another group's set of problems, and I think that the issue with like MRA and feminism is a lot of the time they are looking at their problems, and well, I actually think it's worse with MRA though, because I'm a bit biased, looking at their problems just in relation to the other movement or in comparison to someone else's problems. So often MRA seems to be saying like, well, feminists do this and feminists say that, and women have got this and women have got that, and it's all in comparison. They control
the narrative. That's the problem, Tim. When you have feminism controlling the gender narrative, I mean, the perfect example, the Red Pill movie being shut down in Melbourne, because they don't want any other opinion out there. When they control the narrative, they're going to get criticism. If they were to say, hey, the men's rights movement's over there, they've got different opinions, that's fine. We should have different opinions and have discussions like we're having here. There wouldn't be half the fucking disputes that there are. But when they shut people down, they protest, they stop groups being formed at universities to talk about male suicide.
But I think
when they do these things, of course they're going to get criticism.
The issue with like Paul Elam, for example, is at least from outsiders' perspective, when they have a look at some of his material, it seems very anti-woman, rather as opposed to just talking about men's issues and like because he's got a whole lot of material which is basically objectifying women and talking about how shitty they are, and how evil they are,
Paul's basically doing a male men's rights version of clickbait because he's nowhere near that misogynistic or whatever.
But think about how it appears to observers.
I agree.
I have an issue.
They don't think this is men's right. They think this is a guy who hates women, kind of.
Well,
maybe he's not. Maybe
I know what you mean. Like, I have a bit of an issue with that. Like, obviously, we're not going to try and like word police people, but when I think it was Janet Bloomfield was like putting around stuff about why women shouldn't vote, like we might be able to see like the deeper stuff she's talking about, but when like lay members of the public, like the normies, see it, they're going to be like, what the fuck?
Well, that's what I said.
Janet Bloomfield sucks.
That's why I said most of it's just clickbait. It's something inflammatory or shocking to get you to get all mad and read it just to see how much worse it could possibly get.
Well, Paul has stated before that no one was listening to him and other MRAs before he started doing that stuff. So my theory is that maybe a new movement needs extremists to shake things up and to get notice, and then once that's happened, the more moderates can come in and find the middle ground. Right. But there are basically 3 articles which feminists constantly quote from Paul Elam out of hundreds. And 2 of them I've criticised in the past. The third one I defend because it was actually in response to a Jezebel article making fun of male victims of domestic abuse. And strangely, none of the articles that quote the Paul Elam article refer to the original article. Very strange that. But, Paul does sometimes criticize aspects of femininity, just like feminists sometimes criticize aspects of masculinity. So I have to ask, why is one okay and not the other?
I think, to me, it's because, just on a personal level, and look, I don't know enough about Paul Elam, but it seems like he's kind of bitter about his divorce and like taking it out on.
No, I think you're getting that opinion from biased articles. Like I said, there are some articles and some things Paul has done which I criticize. But if you listen to him on hangouts and things like that, he's a very different person.
Right.
Listen to him on the hangout with the skeptic feminists, for example.
Like, but what about men's domestic violence? While women are talking about there's, you know what I mean? And like, they don't really have any sincere like involvement with men's.
All
rights.
lives matter, bro.
But yeah.
But hold on. Your side does that too.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about male circumcision, I'm shut down automatically because female circumcision is so much worse, and we can only talk about that. I mean, we hear that all the time when we talk about male circumcision.
Yeah.
Well,
and
actually,
I think talking to feminists about like male domestic violence actually is a good strategic move, because if you try to talk about male domestic violence, nobody really listens to you. If you'll ask feminists about male domestic violence, eventually they'll yell back, and like they'll get like attention for like male domestic violence.
And once again,
I'm starting to see like feminists actually start to address it now. So that's a good thing.
And once again, if feminists are controlling the gender narrative, then I think it's fair for us to bring up counterpoints. If only female domestic abuse is being talked about, then surely we should be able to bring up male domestic abuse victims as well.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's a comedian out there that basically, to me, had the perfect line about, when you bring up something and then somebody's like, yeah, well, I have it worse because of blah. And, the line that he used, and I'll never forget it, is, and I've used this on people quite a bit, is, well, how does your suck make my suck not suck?
And the thing is, if we bring up male domestic abuse victims, we're not saying that female domestic abuse victims don't exist. We're saying, what about the other side?
No, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what contra means is, like, people who actually don't give a shit about the men's rights movement or give a shit about men themselves will they're just playing anti-feminists or whatever. Like, not that that's a bad thing,
So
but
they're not
just
MRAs then.
Yeah.
I think some people are like that. Like, they just are men's rights activists, but I think a lot of people are also genuine about it. Like, you can't really tell who's genuine and who's just trying to sort of stick up to the feminists unless they admit it. Like, what's his name?
Surely it's possible to care about both men and women.
Well, actually, that seems to be an impossibility, because I actually do care about both. And I get subjected to these damn conversations all the time where it's one side or the other. And it's like, everybody's a human, you fucking idiot. It's just we have different plumbing. The hell is
That's
wrong
why I was
with
asking why we can't talk about issues that affect both genders without going, but this gender has it worse.
Global warming is a woman's issue, and
that's what I mean. Like, we look at domestic violence again, and men have much less resources to help them, so we don't have to.
But while only one gender is being talked about, whether it be DV or circumcision or whatever, then you have to bring up the other to even it out. I agree. We should be just talking about domestic abuse. We should just be talking about banning all circumcision or genital cutting of any kind on someone underage. And we shouldn't have to gender it. But when only one group is allowed to be talked about.
Well, I think just in the case of the genital mutilation, I think the main reason it comes up in that way is just because the female version is seen as so much worse. Really.
Well, there's 4 different versions of the female version, and some of them are equivalent to the male circumcision, and some are less harmful.
Oh.
And for example, in England, they're talking about banning adult women from getting genital piercings because it fits in group 4. So they're not concerned about newborn baby boys against their will having their genitals cut, but at the same time they want to prevent adult women from getting what is technically female genital mutilation of their free will.
That's definitely
this is kind of what I'm talking about. If we went back in time to when feminists were rallying against female genital mutilation, and it was just genital mutilation they were trying to end, both genders would have been saved from an injustice that's just a violation of human rights. But instead, women were the protected class and men are left behind.
Well, they're two very different issues. I mean, especially if you consider like North African female genital mutilation, it's much more severe than mere male circumcision. It's often removal of the entire clitoris. Sometimes, at least in places like Somalia, it involves actually sewing up the vagina throughout pubescence until the woman's married. So
I agree, but that doesn't mean that male genital mutilation isn't.
That's exactly what I was talking about. It has to be which one has it worse. It's not just this is a human rights violation to chop up a child's genitals. It's but women have it worse, so we have to think about that.
I'm not remotely trying to discredit the case against male circumcision, but I do think that there's sort of two different issues that are practiced in two very different circumstances, and one of them is much more severe than the other one. And I think that the fact that it's more severe means that there's some legitimacy in having a group that's focused specifically on that.
If they focused on genital mutilation in general, that it's a human rights violation, not which is worse, just that it's a human rights violation.
The circumstances
why can't I keep
for AIDS? The circumstances aren't different.
Caring about malaria.
No. The circumstances aren't different. Both were done to.
They are different. Very different cultures. Very different geographical.
No. If you look at
very different consequences.
If you look at genital cutting of males in Africa, it's done under exactly the same circumstances.
No, it just isn't. I mean, it's often.
It is. Males in Africa, they're teenage boys. They have their genitals cut by people who aren't medical professions in unhygienic conditions, often using glass or rusty knives or whatever. It results in infections, sometimes amputation of the penis, and quite often death. Every year there are deaths because of this.
We can
only compare the worst case female circumcision to the best case male circumcision, and that's a bullshit argument.
I think that's like part of the big problem is when people talk about genital cutting, they do think about the fourth one of FGM. That's the worst. Then they think about like a really sterile, safe situation like in America. So it's
the real question.
Exactly. Well, but I mean, the original question was like, why does this always come up? And I think that's exactly why, because people are thinking of the worst female genital mutilation versus just normal everyday circumcision.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It should just be at its base. It's a human rights violation. Everybody has the right to intact genitals. Period. There's no other argument to be made. Why do we have to talk about what's worse?
Let's take what Miss Anonymous just said and say, can we say it's safe to assume that everybody here is against people taking sharp objects to other people's no-no bits?
Yeah.
I think we all agree.
But not all my hangouts are serious. I also let my hair down a bit and do some which are a little bit less serious. For example.
Are we sharing this fucking video or what?
Yeah,
it's Schmeckle's doing it now.
I think everyone has to go.
Oh, Schmeckle's doing it.
I am violated.
What the fuck is this?
Put some clothes on, you fucking gay faggot.
Over and tickle me. I'm feeling ticklish. Do you want to come over and tickle me?
No.
Baby?
I don't. I want to even less now.
Anyone else curious about which part of his body is actually ticklish?
I am not.
Oh, please.
I mean, just let yourself imagine.
Anywhere you like. As long as you are a vegan, you can tickle me anywhere you like. As long as you are a vegan, if you're somebody who eats bodies, then you're not allowed to tickle my body. If you're somebody who eats bodies, then you're not allowed to tickle my body.
Sorry, I almost vomited.
That was some great writing right there. I was really impressed.
Okay,
The
Chad.
rhyming of body and body, and then the repetition of it. It really drove the fact home.
Chad, I want you to tell me which part of his body would you want to tickle first? That's the question.
Over and tickle me, vegan baby.
I can almost fucking see his dick. It's terrifying.
Why are you trying to look at it? Why is that where your eyes are focused?
It's like you can't look away.
You want to come over and tickle me, vegan baby.
Report this or something.
Want to come
Like,
over
I take it he never does oral sex because he hates eating meat.
If he hates meat, how can he have sex?
You're welcome, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
We
That
wish
was,
to kill you now.
Nah.
I've never wished Jeffrey Dahmer was alive so bad in my life.
I've never wished every serial killer that has died rebirth.
No, it would be poetic justice for him to be turned into meat.
Oh yeah, and eat.
Still echoing.
Because
That was
Jeffrey
truly
Dahmer
amazing.
is not a kind person.
Oh, dude, be careful. He's going to ask you to collaborate on his next music video.
Oh, yeah, I'm so down.
We should do a parody of him.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Who's going to be the guitar playing naked band?
Oh, God.
It has to be Felfa.
Of course it does.
He's the only one that shows his face on camera, so it has to be by default.
Well,
but
yeah.
showing my face doesn't mean I have to show my prepubescent pecker, okay? Jesus Christ.
Hey, you can't actually see his dick. He's very, very good at hiding it, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I'll cut a hole in the back of my guitar, too.
There you go. I question whether or not he has a dick. I think it's just a vagina.
You gotta show.
Or he's like smooth like Ken.
You gotta show.
It's a vagina.
It's a vagina.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Bane, everybody wants to see you naked with a guitar.
Again.
Again.
I sent you my Christmas card from last year.
It's
You
true.
didn't show the audience, though. You only sent it to a few of us.
Well, it's
I mean,
private. It's special.
I don't mind doing it naked on camera because, thanks to Samaj, everyone's already seen my dick.
There you go. We have a volunteer.
All right. There we go.